Hello, and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my Aether traveling companion with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm wrapped forever in bandages of my own disdain.
I mean, that seems pretty accurate. Today, friends, we're going to be answering some questions from you, our wonderful listeners. If you have questions for this or any of our shows, just as a reminder, you can go ahead and send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, we have 2 channels set aside for everybody. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel open for everyone. Same rules apply. If you are a Patreon subscriber, however, you get access to the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel. We tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. We're going to start with a question here from our friend Speed Lancer. Do we yet know how long ago the Ethereals shattered Koresh in their attempt to stop Dementius the first time? Various NPCs and lore items mention eons and millennia, but I never saw a definitive measure of time. How likely is it that it happened around the War of the Ancients? So Koresh has been, for the last 20 years, up until this expansion, Koresh has been a plot hole. It's been not well defined, and a lot of the stuff, even in Burning Crusade, was, I think, decidedly vague on purpose. In, I believe, the Burning Crusade, I think they hinted at it being about 1,000 years ago, which would put it closer in line to events on Azeroth. But as we moved into the War Within, we now know that it was probably several 10 of thousands of years ago. Part of the confusion is based off of how long the life of an ethereal or a broker is after they've been moved into their energy state, which we now know is basically nigh immortal unless their energy is taken away from them or used or their wraps are destroyed in a way that they can't hold themselves together. So I don't know that saying that it happened around the War of the Ancients would ever be a good measure of time, but it definitely happened longer than we initially expected. And I'll let Matt add anything he wants to that one.
Well, there is a quest with a character named Outcast Hisfran, who says that the devouring took place 100,000 years ago, perhaps more. But that's just one guy. I don't know how valid his statement is. I do know that it took a while ago, and I think it took, well, even if we go with the most conservative estimate, it took significantly, it happened way before anything that happened on Azeroth, including, the invasion of the Legion. I think it probably took place before the destruction of Argus, even. So, but this is this is just one person saying this. While I don't necessarily think that leaving it incredibly vague is a plot hole so much as it was just them not defining it, because there was no real reason to do so, and we've always wanted to keep it open so they could do something with it later. But regardless of how you define it, if you call that a plot hole or not, it doesn't really matter. The point is, they have been vague on purpose, and as a result of this, we do not have anything like consensus on how long ago it was. But the War of the Ancients was only 10,000 years ago, which is, I mean, I say only, like 10,000 years is a short amount of time, but compared to, say, the destruction of Argus, which is well over 25,000 years ago, it's quite possible that they didn't happen even close to each other. I would find it unusual if they did, especially since Dementius isn't in any way, shape, or form related to Stargaris. Much closer to the kind of being that orders old gods around. So yeah, I don't think that there's a connection, but I cannot stand here and tell you that there isn't, if that makes sense. I cannot tell you when it actually happened. I can just tell you that everybody seems to agree that it took place a while ago. But that's as specific a timeline as we get, I believe. Unless there's a quest I'm forgetting that Joe remembers, which is quite possible.
No, I don't think we ever get any like real definition. I think part of the other thing to consider here too is I believe they've established that time gets weird around major cosmic events in certain cases where at one point in time the twisting nether, the space between worlds was considered anomalous to time and space, essentially, where traveling through it could be, decades, could be millennia, could be eons, not exactly a linear path via time or spatial reasoning. It's also possible that with what they did to Koresh, that time may be considered or looked at differently from their perspective. For them, it could be a blink of an eye, right? It could have not been 100,000 years ago. It could not have been an eon ago. It could have been yesterday. Um, it, I think it is again purposely not specifically like qualified. It's not specifically like described beyond people's recollection of it. And I think that's the more important takeaway, at least in terms of characters and story. It's how they feel about it, right? Like for somebody like Venari, I don't know that they would dwell on the length of time. They would view the task at hand, and looking back on it, they may look at it as, oh yeah, that just happened like yesterday. Whatever, no big deal. It doesn't change what I have to do today. Locust Walker, another example of somebody who, that wound is still fresh, and therefore for him, no time at all has passed. For some, it may be that something that they're trying to put behind them and are trying to move past. And then there are others that are just kind of stuck in that sort of wake of the events. So maybe there is a metaphysical reason why we have different accounts of time, or maybe it is just the concept of self. Because that's the other thing we don't really know, right? Like we learned during the whole ritual of essentially giving us Reshi wraps and us going through and being temporarily able to make ourselves incorporeal, that it's a very hard process. And the folks that went through it didn't necessarily have a choice. That they were wrapped as like sort of to keep themselves together and in a humanoid form, something, that couldn't be, well, they were in a form that was essentially going to be easily consumed by the all devouring, right? And so they needed something to keep themselves together. We don't know how that tragic event forced or warped their sort of sense of reality or self, right? We also know that they can be unbound for a certain period of time. I can never remember the actual boss's name because we only just call it Wacky Wavy Inflatable Tube Man. But he's like the second or third boss, depending on what order you go in Manaforge. You see the energies of the souls being distilled into tubes to then be wrapped in the special threads and then given form. But before they are given that form, they're sort of energy blobs or like energy elementals, I guess would be the best way to put it. They don't necessarily have a sense of self. They don't say anything. They don't really react. And we don't know how long they've been swirling around in it. And it reminds me of demons in particular. It reminds me of Antorus, where for a demon, I'm going to air quote here, going through the process of Antorus, they don't necessarily know how much time has passed. They're aware of the torture. They're aware of the pain. But for them, it could have been a day. It could have been 100 years. So is that the same for the Koreshi? Is it the same for the Ethereals and the brokers based off of when they were given or coalesced back into a humanoid form? No idea. So I think it's purposely vague, and I think it's made for broader consumption, at least in our terms. Go ahead, Matt.
I went up and looked up Outcast Hizron's entire dialogue tree from the turn-in quest. And he actually says a couple of things that kind of attach to what Joe is saying, which is why I thought I should go look at it. And he talks, one of the things is when he says, 100,000 years, perhaps more? Who can count anymore? The peril and flaw of being immortal is that time is meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
But meaningless as it is, it was all I needed to break 2 oaths. One to Nexus King Salidar himself, when I left his ranks. The other, he lowers his gaze deep in thought, is a subject that weighs heavily on my soul, on my shoulder. And, they don't have a connection to what they were. Like the only connections they have are little bits of memory. Their physical essence, their physical form is just a construct built around the energy, possibly even just straight up their anima, which might be how the brokers can get into and out of the Shadowlands. Maybe they just take off their suits and go through a thing that, anima goes through. And then since they're sapient anima, they cannot go to the Arbiter, not go to any of the places. I don't know. But I do think that there's a connection between them being anima, because I think that's got to be what they are. I mean, that's just, if they are souls, they are anima. We've seen this. When you go to the Shadowlands, that's what the souls there are made of anima. That's what they are. So I feel like the time disruption is because essentially they are dead. They are not physical beings with living bodies anymore. Their time doesn't do anything to them.
Yeah,
that's why
they're out of time, essentially.
Yeah, like they do not live, they do not die. They are outside the cycle.
Yeah, and it also makes me think of some other things that we've talked about in the past that sort of play into this concept of time as well. Not just the Bronze Dragonflight and the Infinite Dragonflight. That is time manipulation. But going back to like the short story, 1,000 Years of War, Alarian Torellian lived 1,000 years, except that they kind of didn't, right?
Yeah, no time passed, even though time passed. They mentally experienced 1,000 years, subjectively. Physically, nothing happened to them. Yeah, because the Twisting Nether doesn't do that for whatever reason.
Yeah, and we know that at least we know that in particular the Argus was fully within the Twisting Nether, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it being fully shrouded in the Nether alters time. Koresh is also in a weird spot. It exists and doesn't exist all at the same time. It's in our interaction with it, we're never actually on the planet like itself, right? We're on the outskirts of it. We're on pieces that have been jettisoned away from it after exploding. Like you look over and you see like the swirling core of the planet. And yes, maybe that's where part of the Mana Forge takes place, but it doesn't really feel like it's actually in the core of it. And most of our interactions with it are outside of it. So, we don't know if it's actually within the Twisting Nether, or maybe it is. Maybe that's why they're able to distill all that void energy down to essentially supercharge and wake up the fragment of Dementius's body. We also know that Dementius emerged there originally, and we don't know the mechanism of that either, because now you're adding void to the mix, right? And void,
and I think, not to interrupt you, I think we should also mention that this also has a corollary in what we know about Outland.
Yeah.
Outland is a big chunk of Draenor that is not in regular space, nor is it in the Nether fully. And different parts of it are differently in the Nether. Like Netherstorm is practically in the Twisting Nether. And you'll notice that's the only zone in Outland that had a Mana Forge built on it.
Yep.
And when the Ethereals came to Outland, they mostly congregated in Netherstorm. They didn't entirely congregate there. Some of them went to other places. But even the ones that went to other zones, none of them went to the zone that felt the least nethery, which is the starting zone, Hellfire Peninsula.
Well, and I want to add on to this too, real quick. Now think of that going back to Netherstorm, going back to when we went to Burning Crusade and the first foray into there. That was our first introduction to Ecodomes, right? Why were they building them there? Because they needed to know how the Ecodomes reacted in an environment that was similar to what happened to Koresh, right? Where does Venari go to learn what she needs to know about revitalizing Koresh? She goes to them all. Both of these places are out of time, right? They are essentially removed from time. But now going back to the thing I was going to say about the Void, with Dementius, the Void in general has a weird effect. And we've seen this where, because it is capable of seeing and essentially interacting with all possibilities, the Void itself also doesn't necessarily adhere to time to begin with. Like, considering Argus. Argus is not just steeped in the twisting nether. It is a world that part of it is consumed by void. Not all of it, but some of it.
Yeah, and that's the zone we even go to and go into the dungeon and, see the Naru that is twisting. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
Or the home that the void elves consider themselves, or consider themselves home at, those asteroids, the Talagas Rift. Like that is also removed from time. But think of some of the other things the void has done. The Black Empire, we go back and see it when we're dealing with it. And yes, we're dealing with the bronze and infinite dragonflight at the time, but the old gods remember things. They operate outside of time. They have a reach that is broader than we can think of. And while they may not be pure void, they're adjacent to it. Imagine what that is for pure void. Imagine what that is for Dementius emerging and what that would possibly do, not just to your sanity, but your concept of time. It has to go wonky because, again, it just stretches in all directions. It has always existed and thus must always also exist type deal. It doesn't care about the march of time. Void doesn't necessarily decay like true living matter does. It is not beholden to it. It itself is also outside of a cycle in its extreme. Not always, not all of it, but in its extreme, it kind of is. So that's just another monkey wrench to throw into it. So it's a long way to sort of get about answering your question, which is we have no bloody idea because it is both possible but also impossible to really pin down the time in which Koresh exploded because it's all a matter of your perspective. From us living on Azeroth, maybe 100,000 years ago, maybe 10,000 years ago, maybe 1,000. From those that
maybe all three.
Because
it could have happened. It could, like, literally the waves of the effect could come to us at different times.
Yeah, what is it? What is the theory, the black hole theory or whatever it is, where it's like
time dilation.
Time dilation, right? Because it can happen simultaneously at multiple points in time, but it's one event. Which we don't have time to get into that. That's a whole weird episode that we not necessarily beholden to lore watch, but Matt and I both tend to be very weird geeks that read. Well, I guess you guys are too. We go down weird rabbit holes, and physics and science tends to be one of them that, depending on.
Yeah. Just in this case, let's just say this. Did it happen at some point? Yes. Do we know when? No. Do different people tell us different things? Yes. Do we know which one of them is right? No. Could they all be right? Yes. Could they all be wrong? Also, yes. That's what we got.
And I want to go on to the next question because I think it ties in with this a little bit. And this one comes from Vic Z Link. Now that we know what Venari's true purpose was, why was she so secretive about it when we met her in Shadowlands? Restoring Koresh seems like a noble goal to me and not something you'd need to hide. Did she distrust us that much back then, or is she hiding something else that we still don't know about? So going back to the destruction of Koresh, we now know, and now going through the War Within and going through the Mana Forge and going through and learning what happened to ostensibly her people are mostly against her. They are mostly against the saving of Koresh. So many of them have fallen sway to essentially a cult of the void under King Saladar, right?
King Saladar, not just some guy.
Their ruler, the one that ruled them in life, right? So all of these people that are being captured and being, put through and being void infused and coming out as void ethereals and serving King Saladar in resurrecting the great devourer of the universe, that's all of them. There's a very, very, I don't know if that could be essentially overstated. If you follow the story, the ones that are rebelling against it are either the Wastelanders, who are, living on the outskirts, but still can fall and be captured and being turned into void ethereals. And a matter of fact, have been since the brokers and the ethereals have scattered to other ends of the universe, to other cartels that may have their own purposes or maybe don't want to save Koresh. They want to save their own bacon. So now, if you advertise that you're trying to resurrect Koresh, what happens? Let's say you tell the ethereal Jim Bob that, hey, Jim Bob, I'm going to go resurrect Koresh. That's great. I'm going to go tell the boys. Jim Bob goes and tells the boys. that entire group of people gets taken in by the Void Ethereals and converted over into Void Ethereals to serve their king. Well, now they have to tell him that Koresh is going to be resurrected and that Venari's in the maw, figuring out how to use anima in order to do this. What is anima? Anima is a very large power source. What would I think that a giant Void Lord that they're trying to resurrect would absolutely love? Oh man, delicious anima.
And we know that this because we have seen the Void invade the Shadowlands trying to get the anima.
Yeah. Why would it want it?
Like we've seen them do it. We know that they do it. We know that the various peoples of the Shadowlands, they created a whole realm of the souls of absolutely hard men and women and people to crush anything that invaded the Shadowlands. And the Void is right up there on the list. That's the dangers the Shadowland has. The Shadowlands is a gigantic pool of magic, ultimately. It's a gigantic pool of the power that drives the universe. It's sort of like a sump well, where like water runs back down into it, and then the water can be brought back forth.
It's also power with infinite potential.
Yes. And what does the Void love?
Infinite potential.
Yeah. So it's a really fine line here. It could be very dangerous to tell anyone anything about what you're doing, especially when you know not only you outnumbered like 20 to 1 or 20,000 to 1 maybe.
We don't have the true numbers, but it's pretty staggering.
Yeah. And those of your people, like her cartel exiled her.
Yeah.
For even looking into this. And in fact, she even quit a cartel to join Cartel Vey, which is why her name is Venari. She's in the Cartel Vey, except then she left them to do this. Technically, she shouldn't even be calling herself Venari, but what are they going to do? They're trying to kill her anyway. She's got a lot of reasons to hide and a lot of reasons not to tell anyone what's going on. Plus, even she makes clear, in addition to all this other stuff, she doesn't give a rat's behind about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
She does not care. Like, she'll work with Xal'atath. She doesn't care. She doesn't like Xal'atath. She doesn't respect Xal'atath. She's certainly not going to follow her, but she'll work with her if it'll get her more of what she needs to restore the world. That's her job. That is her goal. She does not care about anything else. She doesn't care about making friends. She knows full well that she's not going to make enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if she converted every Ethereal and broker who wasn't already under Saladar's thumb, that'd be like leading a group of 5-year-olds up against the mass, United States Marine Corps. She can't beat them in force, so she's not trying to. Let them fight. Let other heroes come and fight them. I don't care. This is what I care about. My fortune for the world that was. Isn't that what she says?
Yeah.
I don't remember. So yeah, no, Venari doesn't give a rat's butt about telling us what she's up to. In fact, not only is it good for us not to know in her mind, because then we can't reveal it, but while we're being big, strong heroes fighting to save the day, she can get about her job. And nobody is going to spend time going after her with those lunatics here. These people, they went and punched Sargeras in the face. Mm-hmm. These people are crazy. One of them stepped through a portal and attacked Sargeras with an axe. These ones killed Argus. You go ahead. You deal with them. You fight them. I'm going to be over here making effectively greenhouses. You think that Dementius is not looking at Venari and thinking, yeah, you definitely got to stop greenhouse lady. And that's just fine by her because that's her goal. And she does not care about anything else.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to consider that too is just take a look at how the War Within evolved, right? And look at her story. It is not until she's there and the domes are ready to go does she pull anybody in, really. Like, she has a group of people working for her now. She may have had them before, but anybody else would have been potentially a liability. And we may have been a liability to tell what was going on. Because, and I have said this before, I will say this again, and this will always be true. We mess everything up. We fix stuff, and don't get me wrong, we're the big heroes. We do some great things, but it is, we can count on a single hand how many times we have left a place better than we have found it. It is not very many, let me tell you. And it's
I mean,
because
sometimes we go in and prevent it from getting much, much worse, but we usually do that by still leaving it pretty bad.
yeah. It's just one of those things that is, well, regardless, getting back to the point, we could be a liability, right? And let's look at what happened with Anduin in Shadowland. Anduin had the best intentions. He still got ridden around like a puppet. What would that happen if it was one of us that knew? We happened to welcome a Nathrazim into our order hall in the Paladin order. What would happen if they found out? Who would they tell? How would that affect what was going on? Keeping it close to the mechanical chest for Venari is the best option available. Trust a very few number of individuals, if any at all, proceed with your quest, help distractions out by giving them what they need to become further distractions for people that would look at you. And then when the time is right, complete your mission. And that's it, right? Like, until we're at the Ecodomes, she never told us what was going on. And yes, it was a noble goal, but it wasn't the nobility of it that was the problem. It was the potential of it being disrupted or broken. And now, because she did that, Koresh has a snowball's chance in hell.
Which it didn't have before. Before, this was all literally pointless. Like, there was no point. Even the people of Koresh that served its world soul couldn't hear it. It was effectively dead. Whatever she's done, it may have created an entirely new world soul within what's left of the planet, or somehow reawakened the one that was there. I don't know. I don't think there's even any way for anyone to know at this point. But it went from, chances, like negative chance to do this, not just like very low chances, but negative chances, to an actual 0.0000001% chance. And that's on Venari, who doesn't care about anything else. It's even when she lets you help her, she does so because she's in the final stages and she can't fail at this point. Like, when I don't say can't fail as in she's destined to succeed, I mean she literally is like, I cannot allow this to fail.
Yeah, and not only that,
I will do literally anything to not let it fail.
But she's also at a point too, by the time we get there, that even if she falls, there's pieces in place to keep it going. Right?
And enough people that have been serving her that they might be able to keep it going.
And the ones that she's bringing on board too, because don't forget, that's a big part of the storyline as well, is revealing to the rest of the Ethereals and the brokers, I got a solution, I got a fix, and it works. Watch this. And then, repopulating a dome with life from literally nothing, from anima, essentially.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't remember the exact point when we bring the world soul to Ecodome Aldani, but there's a whole deal with like other people fighting, like attacking. I think it was one of the soul scribes. They attack and the wastelanders attack, and the Maul Walker saves the day because that's what we do. And that's where showing the world soul to them convinces them to finally turn on the Nexus King.
Yeah, the Wastelanders initially they turn on they not necessarily turn on the Nexus Kings. I don't think they knew that he was back in that power, but it wasn't until they were on board with us for the sake of Koresh until the Nexus Kings showed up and invoked their oath, right? And made them conflicted. But that goes back to the first question of where we answered where time for them is weird, and for them the Nexus King, their oath to him is yesterday. Right, it's not necessarily 10,000, 1,000,
yeah, because again,
years ago.
Time doesn't matter to immortal beings.
Yeah,
it doesn't affect you. So yeah, no, it's absolutely, it makes sense. So there's just a lot to it.
Yeah, there's a lot there. It is a complicated. Ethereals and brokers are complicated. Who would have thought? But hopefully that answers your question. We're going to go on to our next one, and this one comes from our friend Red Bandit, otherwise known as Syncromu, was just talking to my daughter about the dragon aspects, and it made me wonder, what species do you think the aspects, Malagos and Eltharion included, would have picked if they chose today? Do you think they would have had a big elf motif, or they have picked other denizens like Orc or Draenei for a visage form? Correct me if I'm wrong,
They
Matt.
did do that.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Some dragons, one of
The blue dragonflight in
Oh,
particular.
Yeah, but there's a red dragon you meet in Blackwing Lair.
Mm-hmm.
He's there as an orc.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's the one that later on we fight in Blackwing Lair itself. He's the second boss in Blackwing Lair, and when we first see him, he's an orc. The reason, in fact, we know for a fact that Zaxxas, aka Neltharion, was not always a human.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one of several forms he took. He came as a night elf several times. He came to the Drakthir as a Drakthir at least once. He came to other people's in different forms. Even before he fell, before he became Deathwing, he was appearing in all sorts of different forms. We don't know about Malygos exactly. Like, we know that a lot of blue dragons do pick different forms other than elves. We know that the fact that oh bloody heck, what's her name? She's the head of the Red Dragonflight.
Alexstrasza.
Thank you, Alexstrasza. Alexstrasza couldn't have appeared as the elf she appears as now during the war, the War of the Ancients, or before it, because there weren't any elves that looked like that. They didn't exist yet. And the fact that she and Elune are the only two of the original aspects that are direct relatives. They are sisters. They come from the same clutch.
Not Elune, Ysera.
Ysera. Yeah, Ysera. My bad. Elune is the moon. Ysera is the dragon. Ysera and Alexstrasza were clutchmates. Same. They came two eggs from the same laying. They were close. I think Alexstrasza basically acted like the protective older sister, and Ysera acted like the younger sister who was a little flighty, but actually was a little bit more creative. And when you read the book, Dawn of the Aspects, none of them takes a visage form at any point in it because they're all proto-traits. But it's definitely hinted later on that the visage for a dragon is not the same as the visage for a Drakthir.
Yeah, it's more malleable, right?
Yeah. Like Malygos, Malygos usually showed up when he showed up at all, either in dragon form or as an elf. But you've seen what Caligos's form is. There's no way that's what he looked like when he was first hatched.
Caligos technically is taking on the form of a half elf, right?
Yeah.
So
Caligos looks like one of the people from what do you call it?
Arathor.
The Arathor. So
the Arathi.
There's no way that the Arathi were in that form when he was born, because he's not super young just because he's not as old as the original aspects. He's still several thousand years old.
Yeah, and I want to point out, like, especially in Dragonflight, when you get to the point of the blue Dragonflight coming back in, when Caligos actually reaches, or essentially lights the beacon, and they all show up.
One's a troll.
One's a troll. They're all, I think one's a gnome. Like, they're all different.
Isn't one a Tauren?
I think one is a Tauren, yes. So, like, and we know that the blue Dragonflight has integrated more with the races of mortals than maybe some of the others, simply because they accumulate knowledge, which is why the whole library exists. But they will choose any and all motif that is available to them. And going back to what Matt said, Drakthir seem to be the ones that have like a visage, like a singular. Once they're chosen, once their visage is chosen, and it is a hybrid visage, right? It is not fully humanoid.
It is not pure. Yeah, I know. It is not like I look exactly like a gnome.
Yeah. Like, where then you go to the actual dragons, not necessarily the dragon aspects, but just dragons in general. And it seems like they can choose whatever form suits them in that moment, right?
And Chromie has not just chosen a form. Chromie has chosen a form that is not the gender that they were born in.
Yeah.
And that's a statement by Chromie that this is what my gender is. So they're way more malleable than the Drakthir.
Yeah, we've had some that have chosen to show up as Volpera, but we don't think that they were originally a Volpera.
No.
But they showed up to help with the War of the Sand, essentially there.
Even those Dormu and Soridormi,
who
both look like elves. There's no way they looked like that when they were first, turned into aspects. There's no way, because that's not what elves looked like at the time.
Yeah. So I
There
mean,
were a few elves that existed looked like night elves. That's what they were. Night elves or nightborn, whatever you want to call it. That's what they looked like.
and to be fair, and I think that makes it really interesting. And I think like Veranoth also adds some new complexity to this. So
Hmm.
Veranoth is one of the newest aspects, but even then, as a primordial elemental dragon that was empowered in much the same way that the dragon aspects were, except by elemental lords, um, she had a humanoid form that was closer to a Drakthir's hybrid form than it was a pure visage form, but not abnormal. Like, I could see us potentially seeing future dragons taking on like hybrid forms. If you're closer to nature and you've dealt with the plant people, maybe you start taking on some of those aspects. Maybe that becomes your visage. Um, in again, that whole malleability thing, I think it really serves them because it lets them not ingratiate themselves, but sort of calm the waters a little bit during first contact or during negotiations. Because you, at some point, if a dragon saw mechanomes and was like, "Oh, okay, let's see what they're doing," and wants to know more about it, that they could potentially take on a mechanome form, they probably could. The magic of a dragon is powerful, is all I'm trying to say. The only thing that
Like
I think is,
Uranoth herself, Uranoth before she got aspect powers, successfully froze Odin.
yeah,
Now she didn't freeze him forever; he got out of it. I don't know how. I don't know if she could beat Odin in a fight, but I think it's very
well, now
telling.
she could.
Uh, I'm not going to say it because it
I,
hasn't happened yet.
I would put my
I
money
would
on it.
like her.
Please her enough.
I
Please beat the
I
snot out
would
of Odin.
like her to do it, but you know why I don't like Odin. I'm like a Pikachu that you use too many times.
You are a very angry
Uh,
Pikachu, yes.
yes, but like all of them, like the dragons aspects had another level of power beyond most dragons,
Hmm.
who are themselves like Caligos before he got turned into an aspect was still incredibly good at magic and his dragon form was still incredibly powerful. We fought it in Sunwell, and the only reason we could beat it was because it was possessed.
Yeah.
He wasn't playing. Like when we fought him, that was an incredibly hard fight. I had to let a druid tank it. I was very upset about that. So yeah, there's just their forms are far more malleable. They can be various things. I think the forms they tend to take the most, they either choose to believe that these forms express what they truly are in a way that mortals can understand it, or they're just comfortable with it.
Yeah. Yeah, like I mean, again, in the case of Chromie is a really great example. That's Chromie's like, yeah, this is me. I'm chilling.
I'm
So
cute. I'm fun. To other dragons, I am this cute, fun little thing, and they like me because I'm adorable. And you can't really argue with it. Just because Chromie takes a big Drake form, even in Drake form, and she's not smaller or anything, but she's pretty nice. I like talking to her. She's giving me quests to go through time all the time.
yeah, and the other thing that I
I
would like
can't
to,
wait to see more. Before you talk, I want to see the Storm Drakes.
yes,
I want to see their take visage forms. It would be hilarious to me that they just look normal, but they got lightning constantly crackling around them.
like
Sorry.
I've actually been thinking about this, right? Because now that they're sort of embraced by the rest of Dragonkind and not essentially under Odin's thumb. Like I always wondered, why didn't they have a visage form? They were definitely powerful enough that they could have, but is that an Odin thing? Is that
Almost certainly.
yeah,
Almost certainly. Because we know he interfered with them in so many other ways.
yeah. So now that they're learning about the true breadth of their dragon kin and their dragon power, I had this thing in my brain where like they take on the form of Rykrull,
Well,
like
here's the thing. That's
lightning
actually interesting.
Rykrull.
Think about this. What is Odin's visage form? Because he has one.
Yeah, it's a Rykrull.
Yeah, Javi. What if
Mm-hmm.
he took their form?
Mm-hmm.
What if they weren't doing it?
And that's how the first deal was brokered, right? Because we know that they brokered a deal. We don't know how that happened, but you raised a good point now, because that means that other beings besides dragons can have a visage or take other forms.
Yeah, maybe they learned that from the dragons, or maybe the dragons learned that from the Titans.
Could you imagine the original Ra Den in the Mogu form?
Yeah, I can. Or even more is, what if Raden could take like a star dragon form?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. We know that dragons are are created from the proto drakes by Titan influence. What if that's the Titan influence is not just like, we've seen dragons in other places.
We have.
We've seen elemental drakes that lived entirely in, Deepholm and looked like the dragon form, not a proto drake.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, man.
The one in air,
like,
we fight what essentially looks like a full grown dragon in the air dungeon, the earth dungeon.
Yeah.
We have all of these things. It's dragons are, and I want to say this, dragons in WoW keep an interesting and I think important tradition in fantasy alive, where dragons can be mercurial. They can be awe-inspiring for many different reasons. And from a player-based standpoint and from a story standpoint, I always like the dragons because one of the things that I've always enjoyed in the storytelling is the ability to imprint yourself into a story, to sort of integrate yourself, to immerse yourself into it. And dragons let you do that in a very interesting way because it can almost be anybody, right? And how many players out there have made fan art of themselves as dragons, or their Drakthir in whatever visage forms, and it allows you to sort of imprint yourself in a way that the other maybe heritages in the game do not let you. So I like that, and I hope that it remains like that because dragons are just cool, and dragons getting to be whoever they want to be, I think is awesome. It's neat.
Someday I really want them to connect the dragon, the dragon bone, what, the Dragon Breaker clan? What's the name of that dragon clan? The orcs that basically before they even came to Azeroth said, "Yeah, we kill dragons." They want them to be tied in. I want there to have been dragons on Draenor. I want dragons to be something that just happens on a world as it develops, and maybe it happens even faster on worlds where there's no world soul, because that way there's more anima around to infuse elemental beings and create dragons from them. I don't know, but I would love to see more dragons. Dragon Maw, thank you.
Yep.
So the Dragon Maw, apparently we're always telling people, yeah, these giant lizard flying things. Yeah, we know that they are. We're not surprised by that. And everyone else is like, how have you ever seen this before?
Yeah, and to be perfectly clear, Draenor, not Outland.
Yes, Draenor.
Before a big explosion. But
yeah, before it got ripped apart, before Deathwing decided to go lay eggs there, which is another thing. Why did he do that? We've never really learned exactly why Deathwing thought that was a good idea. Like, why did you want to lay your eggs in another world? I get maybe you didn't want them to get destroyed, sure. Like he wanted to protect them from the other Dragonfleet, sure. But at the same time, there's more to it.
I mean, I also think that part of the story, at least what was hinted, was that he was trying to get it away from the influence of N'Zoth. So
maybe. I mean, that certainly makes sense considering what happens with the black dragons who come back in Dragonflight.
Yeah.
And they do say things like that. I'm just saying that I would love it if he was also just repeating a pattern, like before various things started happening. If you went to one of the elemental planes, you could go from the elemental plane back to, like, imagine if you go from the non-Titan constructed planes back into the material plane, for lack of a better word. They don't call it anything, so we have to come up with something. And that's where elementals, there's earth elementals on Draenor.
What if they're there because of brokers?
Maybe. I mean, that's one possibility, but that would mean that the brokers were there way before we've ever heard of them being there, which is not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And for that matter, broker technology or ethereal technology is not that dissimilar from Apexis.
Yeah, it is not.
Which is something, we know that the Apexis had the ability to summon old gods.
Mm-hmm.
Because we see one in Burning Crusade. We see one being summoned to Outland.
Technically two.
Yeah. And also, when we go to Warlords of Draenor, that curse that gets put initially on the Arakoa and eventually starts getting the orcs as well. That curse comes from weird shenanigans involving gods and creatures from beyond the void. So there's some stuff there too.
Yeah, there is. But I think we got time for one more question before we call it for the day. And this one comes from X Knight. I haven't played since Cataclysm, but one of my favorite worth the grind moments from early WoW was getting my Warlock mounts and minions. I know Paladins had their own mount quest chains. My question is, why did they get rid of those quest chains? Also, if they brought mount quest chains back, what would you think each quest line might be for each class, and what would those mounts look like? So
They did it in Legion.
They did. They brought back some of it in Legion, which if you haven't played since Cataclysm, obviously you wouldn't know. But class questing did come back in Legion. It was not maybe what everybody wanted, but there was elements of it there.
Death Knight one is awesome. Death Knight quest chain is awesome. It's dark. It's sinister. It's got good role-playing elements. It's got good mechanical moments. Chef's Kiss A++ would not change a thing. Even if you feel like a creep after doing it, which you should, it really feels Death Knighty. It feels really tied in. I wouldn't say that every class got that.
No, like Shaman really didn't get that. We got other things, but not that.
I got to get even more treated like a Pokemon by Odin.
Yeah.
Although there is one good moment where I get to punch my mount unconscious so that, I don't have to mess around with it or do any complicated bindings. I'm a warrior, so I punch my dragonish mount unconscious, and when it wakes up, it's like, okay, please don't hit me again. You're like, good, we're going to be friends now. Stop trying to bite me. There are some that were really good. There were some just general quests for various classes. I think Shaman had a pretty solid quest line.
Yeah.
But their mount quest wasn't that great.
All that to come back to the root of the question of why they moved away from it and really haven't done it very much is it takes an incredible amount of effort because partially our expectation has grown considerably from what questing could be. Right. And like to give you an example, in vanilla WoW, there were some absolutely insane quests that classes had to go through, and some appeared at wildly different times. If you were a shaman, your introduction to class questing was literally your introduction to playing the game, because your questing was to initially go talk and make deals with representatives of the four elements to give you your totems to use your powers. And
keep in mind, it was all Horde because there were no Alliance shaman at that time. So it was, in a way, it felt really cool.
It was, but other classes didn't get that. Like if you were a hunter, you didn't necessarily get that. And there wasn't anything else that I can really remember that was very class specific at the time, not even with warlocks, until you got the mount quests. But the mount quests for both the paladins and the warlocks, they came later. They came at level, were they level 40 or were they level 60? I can't remember. I didn't play back then. I know that you had to do Dire Maul, but I don't think they were level 40. I mean, they might have actually, you know what? I think they were level 40 because you got a mount at level 40. You had to do Dire Maul and a couple other places. Stratholme, I know, was in it too. Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it was level 40.
Where other classes had, because we helped with getting people their mounts, but other classes we just had to go buy them, and it was awful. Anyway, but then you had upgraded ones later on, when you hit level 6, you could get it heroic or whatever they called it at the time. You could get a 100% speed mount. And then I'll use hunters as the other example for amazing class questing, but it was only available at max level and only if you did Molten Core and only if you got a specific drop. If you got the petrified leaf, no, you also needed to get the quiver at the time, didn't you? No, everything started with the petrified leaf. So when you got the petrified leaf, it opened up the quest for both Rock Ladar, and I forgot what the initial name for the staff was because Rock and Lock, but it transformed between the two essentially. And that opened up also I think it was a worthy quiver, which gave you the fork to go murder blue dragons to go get it. But the interesting bit wasn't, murdering blue dragons. It was the petrified leaf and getting Rock Ladar was proving yourself an ally to nature by going and hunting demons and using all of your hunter's skills to kill them on weird respawn timers like trying to beat out other hunters to do this. And it was phenomenal questing, but it was very hard. And
not just hard. It was so griefable.
It was very griefable.
I remember my wife was doing it, and I think this is kind of important to explain why it hasn't been done the same way since. When my wife was doing it, a Horde Warlock decided to just kill the demon or enslave it every single time she tried to do it, to the point where we had to pull, our entire guild had to come out and start killing him. And if he didn't flag, because we were not a PvP realm, we couldn't do anything until he mistakenly flagged. We had to start running around trying to get him to target us by mistake. So that's one reason why people were like, I don't want to do this if I have to. Not only do I have to do like incredible kiting all around this zone, and like one of the zones was Ungoro, so you had to kite a demon and try really hard not to walk near a devil sore. So yeah, there was a lot to them. So I think that's one of the reasons we have to really keep in mind is that people just did not want to deal with this level of hard that can be ruined by other people.
Yeah, but expectations for what we want out of a class quest then shifted, and you go to an entire expansion of essentially class questing, which is Legion. While we are fighting Legion and there is a unified story, Order Halls really brought that class fantasy and class questing to the forefront and gave you very cool moments for just about every class. Some were better than others. Some storylines were better than others. But then you had to tie it up with the artifacts that we were getting, powering up the artifacts. It fleshed out the world. The whole backstory of the Silver Hand really became fleshed out during the Paladin questing. During Legion, like stuff we didn't know then became like real here. It has then since been not necessarily abandoned, but they have to be very careful when they put stuff like that in because it takes so much effort. And then
they don't want to just repeat what they've already done.
And also like, players, we're going to expect something special, right? Like I'm not saying that is a bad thing. We should expect good stuff. But it's very easy to become so used to the quality that something subpar sets so many of the players, or something that falls below what your expectation is, sets a subset of players on a warpath. And so they have to tread very carefully, if that makes so.
Oh, it absolutely does, because if you think about it in terms of that, one thing I want to say, because I think it plays off what you're saying, is if Legion when it happened, the various class questing was really well received and really loved, but then they kind of kept repeating themes and elements from it without actually making it the class questing. But stuff like the power, the borrowed power aspect of it kept coming back, and people got disenchanted with it. You don't want to do that. You don't want to go back to that well too quickly.
And then you have to find a balance point too, because do you do another expansion where everybody gets their unique quest experience? Do you throw a one-off in there like the Green Fire quest for Warlocks? Or, do you find organic moments to work them in? If you're dealing with an expansion that is dealing with more of the Paladin stuff, which we think we might be getting when it comes to Midnight, does it make sense then to add class questing in there specifically revolving around Paladins? Probably does, right? But that means the other players, you have to do it in such a way that the other players don't feel slighted, but it does make sense organically with the story. And I think that's more where we're at these days. Instead of specifically calling something out as, this is going to be your class quest, it's more, this is the storyline, and it identifies more closely with your class than maybe the others. And I think there's an element of that we'll see occasionally. And I actually think that that's possibly the best case scenario or the best thing that we can hope for, right? Because
Yeah.
outside of a full expansion experience, I think there's almost no way to do it where somebody doesn't feel slighted or somebody doesn't feel let down potentially. And you don't want to let your players down. The people that make these quests, the people that write these quests, they care very much about what they're doing. And they care very much about how we receive them. And they don't want to give us, for lack of a better term, a crappy product. So they'd rather have that quality than, not. And if we are going to talk about what we'd like to see moving forward, I'd like to see more of that consideration of how the classes interact with the main story. I don't need a shaman specific quest personally, but I'd like to see how shamanism really integrates with the story. And I'll go back to Wrath of the Lich King for this. When you are going through the initial story steps in Wrath of the Lich King, you learn how ingrained shamanism is in what the Lich King is actually doing at the time, because at one point, one of his personalities inside of that helm was a shaman. You understand how he interacts with the spirit world, how he interacts with, ancestors, and how he's not just some one-note necromancer. It's a very complicated intersection between what it means to be a shaman and what it meant to become a death knight.
And they did it really well because it was like a couple of lines, like they dropped a lot of meaning in like a couple of lines to start. I mean, there's more later, but that initial meeting in that expansion, it's brilliant. It's really well done.
And I'd rather see more of that, right? I'd rather see more of these moments where, we're going into midnight. Let Paladin have their moment. Let Paladin have their Turelian moment. Let Paladin have their Leandrin moment, where like they learn what it is to be a Paladin in terms of what is happening in the greater story of the world. And that feels more special to me. And I don't know how you feel about that, Matt, and I'll let you say your piece here. Like, do you have anything specific that you'd like them to do, or is there something that you'd like to see them integrate it in a specific way for class storytelling?
I came up as a warrior, and I've played warrior from 2004 on. So I've been playing a warrior this whole time, and I'm still playing one. I still have that warrior that I made at the time, and I still level him every expansion. I don't necessarily play him after that, but I always make sure to get him up to max level. And our warrior class quests were the dog's breakfast, to be kind. They were go to a place and get punched by people, or go out into the woods and fight a creature like that's an elite 10 levels higher than you are when you get the quest, and keep fighting it until you get that weapon. If you can bring 4 friends, you really should. It got to the point though that where it kind of became a running joke. Like the best class quest for warriors in the original game was the Quel'Serrar quest, which wasn't a warrior quest. It was warriors and paladins. And the paladins had already gotten their shiny horses. And then they got to glom onto our quest too. We were like, great, that's wonderful. And of course, a lot of warriors got Thunder Fury and a lot of warriors got Sulfuros, but these were not class specific. Warriors didn't really get any good class specific quests up to Legion, where they got the worst class campaign of them all. Now the artifacts were good. I liked the warrior artifacts, but I have yet to meet a warrior who thought that the warrior class hall was good, or that the warrior questing through that class hall was good. Like at best, it was okay. And at worst, again, Odin makes you a Pokemon, constantly ordering you to prove your worth and do ridiculous things that are really kind of demeaning, ultimately. I really feel like for some classes, the problem is that Blizzard has no way to figure out how to make them a cohesive thing that you get, quests that make sense.
Yeah, warriors are too broad, right?
Yeah, an orc warrior who grew up, on Draenor before the third, war, is not going to have anything to do, even with an orc warrior who grew up on Azeroth.
But then there's moments like the Sarfane questing where where it's
but
like
that's
that is
Sarfane.
But I'm just saying, but that's very stereotypical of like, yes, this is a warrior, right? Like you have these weird moments, but yeah, I'm with you. I get you.
And the worst part about it is they didn't even have any warriors in the warrior class hall. Like every other, like I went on my Death Knight, my Paladin, and it was like a who's who of cool people that are in your class. And I went to the warrior class hall, and I think Sorfang visited once.
Mm-hmm.
Danath never actually bothered to visit.
Mm-hmm.
Gen Greymane eventually started being my friend. Not even Gen Greymane, sorry, Darius Crowley. Darius Crowley became my friend, and I could have picked somebody else. And that was basically it. But I loved the artifact quests because finally warriors got new and cool things that were specifically warrior weapons. Which, because warriors are what they are, very rarely do we get a specific weapon that's just ours.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas nobody is going to see the Doomhammer in the hands of anybody but a shaman and be okay with it, you know? But if they had to actually invent a weapon to give to warriors. At the time, I was mad Ashkandi wasn't one. But then I'm like, who's going to get it? Hunters got Ashkandi. Paladins got Ashkandi. You know, warriors had Ashkandi. They're not going to just let warriors have it as an artifact. So Stromkar was actually a good alternative because it was unique and it had that cool thing that even if you were a troll, other trolls would be terrified of you when you pulled that thing out. Because it's the original troll killing weapon. It's even more important than Troll Kalar. It's this giant thing that if trolls see it, they run away from it if they can. They'll fight if they have to, but if they can, they're just going to run from it because it's just so legendary. I liked that, and I want them to do, if they're going to do class quests, they need to feel special. They need to feel like they do more than just give you a cool doodad. I feel like they need to give you lore. Like some classes it works much easier because they have an initial common line. And even when you broaden it out, like with druids at this point, you can't argue all druids are from the Cenarian Circle because it's not like, you know, the Zandalari trolls were not going in for meetings, you know?
Yeah, not Kirin Tor, Kul Tiran druids definitely were not either. Right? Like
Yeah.
we the scope of the classes is expanded
but
pretty exponentially.
But they're still basically tied to nature and tied to like, you know, a synergy with like things like that. Shaman, even the goblin ones, even the Zandalari, even ones that aren't even like playable races yet, like the Tonka, they're still dealing with the elements and the ancestors and various spirits. And since I think we've pretty much established that both elementals and ancestor spirits are tied to anima, and we know that there's the fifth element that was being called spirit for a long time, is almost certainly anima, it all ties together. It all makes sense for shaman. Even if you bring in a shaman who's never even heard of the other guys, it still makes sense that they're working along this power and they're affecting the way it interacts with these things. But for warriors, I think almost what you'd have to do is deliberately, the fact that we are not friends and we're not in a group together is the core identity. You know, we are the simplest aspect of war. We pick up things and we hit people with things and we scream things at people, and that's us. And we don't need to be friends to respect that while everybody else out here is doing all this fun stuff, we're the meat and potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are the baseline. We are literally living weapons in and of ourselves. And that's all. We don't tap into chi. We don't touch the elements. We're not pulling on the arcane or the necromantic or, you know, life magic or spirit or shadow or any of it. We are just hitting things and hitting them as hard as we can. And sometimes we get hit back. We have a whole thing about saying things to dragons so mean that the dragon gets really mad and tries to kill us and ignores everybody else. It's not like we're not using the power of the light to compel them. We're just straight up saying something insulting. That we probably have a big book of insults back, and you know, it's like I can imagine all these like arms trainers come they break it out like this giant book and dropping it. Boom. Okay, this has insults for everything you can think of. People opening it up. How did we find out that this makes giants from Draenor mad?
This is our legacy.
Yeah. This is now your tome. Your mother smelled like a gnome. wow, that guy got mad. So that I want to see lore like that makes sense for that class and for other classes too. Like Death Knights and Paladins and some other classes don't really have a solid through line, but rogues, the only thing they should have in common is that they're basically sneaky. That they should be that. And that's fine. That's one of the things I felt like the Legion rogue quests weren't bad, but they felt all over the place. And I feel like trying to tie things together, certain classes shouldn't be concretized and drawn together. They should be disparate. You should have room for an orc spy and a Tauren who, first off, we should have Tauren rogues, but also, we do have them now, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. A Tauren who just, likes to be a scout, and a human who basically plays billiards and convinces people to give him his money. They should all be rogues. Like the guy breaks a bottle and stabs you with it because he's, trying to get away. All this different stuff should work together in these specific kinds of classes. Whereas other classes, it makes sense that they're more concretized and they're more based around a central point. But I think it's quite doable and it should be done.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that answers your question or at least gives you some insight into our thought process on it. Friends, I do want to thank you for joining us and remind you that Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast signing community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to our podcast, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast or the queue, and an ads-free site experience. If you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in. You can email us at podcast@blizzardwatch.com, specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, we have 2 channels set aside for you. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel. It's open to everyone. Same rules apply. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you can hit us up on the Patron Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of thanking you for helping us keep the lights on. But with that, folks, we'll catch you next week.
We love you.